sponsor. With awareness and memory, what we need to do is follow a process to separate memory, which is the idea of what defines us, which traps us to this human form. Once we can separate that process and access awareness, we can then move awareness into higher consciousness and interact with our alien brethren, which I do not see as gods. I see as, on a higher level, our brethren, or as you move up in the ascension process, our children. So let me give you a little background on how I got into this. In my childhood, I was abducted by aliens. All throughout my childhood, I was abducted so often that when they left, which happens between the age of 9 and 13, and happens for most people on the planet, I felt abandoned. I felt like I was left here and was very angry. In my teens, I tried everything I could to get back into that connection with my alien family. I got into Transcendental Meditation. I tried astral projection. I tried remote viewing. I tried different types of meditation. And then in my late teens, early 20s, I had a very intense feeling that I needed to join the service. And I went over during the Gulf War to Germany. I was stationed over in Germany. And when I was there, I met a shaman of sorts, I guess, that I did an apprenticeship with, and he did something really incredible. This shaman was able to, without any psychedelics at all, was able to artificially raise my consciousness beyond the human consciousness, at which time a lot of higher chakra memory came in. And this went on for about a year. And then after the year, I was released from this apprenticeship with this gentleman, and something even more amazing happened. When I was released from this apprenticeship, because it was artificially raised up, I lost that artificial raise. I was lowered down. I lost all the abilities and nearly all the memory of everything I've accessed. Came back to the States, and I had something very, very important and very, very powerful, and that was I knew a destination of what I had forgotten, what I had lost, and because I knew this destination, I was able to go into a meditation experience and begin to unfold it. Now, this meditation experience is known as the place between sleep and awake. When you access the place between sleep and awake, what happens is the soul and the body separates. And then this is where most people go from here, and they get into astral body stuff. They get into astral projection stuff, some remote viewing stuff, doing an astral projection. But what I found was, if you can reintegrate the soul back with the body, it turns the body off and awakens this spiritual experience. And awaken the spiritual experience, in effect, what you're doing is you're bypassing or turning off the conscious mind and access the unconscious mind. Is when you get into transcendental meditations, where I talk about accessing the gap. And the gap is between the conscious and unconscious. We can get into really intense, really powerful experiences for law of attraction, for intuitive journeying to access the spirit world, to get into all this really powerful stuff. But I noticed something different. When I reintegrated my soul back into my body, turned my body off, turned my soul on, I recognized at that point that there were veils of consciousness, and these veils related to the idea of a perceptual ego. And these veils were the veil of the body, the veil of the soul, the veil of the spirit, and the veil of our creative self. And once you lift through or pass through these veils, you'll access yourself existing as awareness alone. Existing as awareness alone is where your awareness no longer bound by the definition of being human, this perceptual soul experience. It's where you can access higher consciousness. You can interact with higher consciousness. I did this. It took about a year to a year and a half because I had no techniques. I had no books. I haven't learned any of my stuff from knowledge. It's all from personal apprenticeships in my youth. At this point of accessing this, what we call the temple of the soul, I started having a reintroduction of alien abduction experiences. And this went on for several years. And it became very, very intense. And in my youth, it was an amazing experience because I had an open level of communication. But in my early 20s, this was a really, really scary experience. Someone had recommended that I go up to the Edgar Cayce Institute in Virginia Beach. And this was in the early 90s, mid-90s at this point, which I did. And they recommended a local group in Atlanta. So I came down on a local group in Atlanta, and the guy speaking, he just happened to be speaking on alien abductions. And I pulled him over afterwards, and I asked him, sir, I've been going through these crazy, very intense physical abduction experiences. What's going on? And he said, did you ask them what your contract is? It never occurred to me. He said, the next time you get abducted, ask what your contract is. So the next time I got abducted, I asked, and they began the process of reshaping my consciousness from being the idea of an individual that is separate from everything to be able to access the universal experience while in a singular experience. And how that works is, when you sit back and you access this universal experience, you interact with nature, you interact with a universal mind of plants, a universal mind of alien energies that are working with you. The secret of being human is you are separate but one, or one but separate. And that's what makes humans so incredible and so dynamic, is that we can be in an individual experience and yet at the same time tap into a universal collective, a hive mentality or a hive mind without being defined by it. And this is the process where ascension begins. Now, when I work with my alien brethren, we got into the reshaping of my consciousness, but we began at the first chakra. And it's funny for a lot of people to think that I have a human body, I'm human, I must be at the seventh chakra. And that's actually not the case. Your human body is at the seventh chakra, but what you are is not. So let me go back and take a step back, going into what we are. We are awareness and memory. And awareness and memory is consciousness. And we look at the human body, or the hue of the man, we're talking about the embodiment with the consciousness associated with the embodiment. Since we are not the human body, we need to start at the perfect foundation of experiences at the first chakra. In the first chakra, we begin to interact with plants. And this is where a lot of Druid religions, this is where a lot of the Native Americans are actually on point, 100% amazing. This is the place where we view everybody needed to start. And what the process is, without using psychedelics, accessing this place between sleep and awake, separation of the soul and the soul comes back in the body, and from there we lift the perceptual veils of memory of ego being the soul, the body, the soul, the spirit, and our creative experience to exist as awareness alone. It is through awareness that we need to interact with plants. So when we interact with plants through awareness, we're accessing of the first chakra, the I am consciousness, the I am awareness, and I am experience of plants.
I want to stop you for just a minute.
Sure.
So I think one of the things to think about too is a lot of people ask, what is ascension? And a lot of people think that ascension is you are going to be accessing these higher realms, move up higher and higher and higher. But really, ascension is about, yes, you're accessing things, but it's really to pull it back down here onto this level while you're in this body and to be able to do it in the present. So a lot of times we talk about why the human body is necessary for ascension versus any other spiritual beings that are out there. And the reason is you have to go back to understanding why the human vessel was created. And I've been working with Joe now for almost 5 years, about 4.5 years. I've started going through my own alien abductions probably about 1.5 years ago. And when you go through those things, it's really more of a remembering process. So we firmly believe that everyone has their own spark of divinity or their own breadcrumb trail back up to their God self, their higher self, that they're going to follow their own individual path back up. So while the science of their process is the same for everyone, everyone's individual processes of getting there can be a little bit different. And the reason is everybody came from that God source and came down through multiple kingdoms of consciousness. And when we talk about kingdoms of consciousness, it's similar to if you're looking at a spectrum of light. You've got the visible band, and then you have all the bands that are above that and below that. And each dimension could be considered a frequency or band of light. So consciousness exists through certain frequencies, and those frequencies are very, very band oriented, and they exist along that whole spectrum. So those bands correspond to dimensions and worlds and things of that nature. But what happens is when you're going through the ascension process, let's say, for instance, you may be on band number 1 and you're trying to get to band number 10. What happened in the past is a lot of high alien consciousnesses or Christ would come in, whether it was Buddha or Krishna or Jesus or anyone else, and they would try to lift up humanity temporarily by boosting them from level 1 to level 10 or 1 to 11 or whatever level it was. Well, the problem is you now have this gap of all the frequency bands that you have not individually journeyed through and maintained and occupied that space. So that, number 1, if you haven't experienced it directly for yourself, you can't teach anybody else how to experience it if you haven't experienced it. And number 2, once you die, it dies out with you. So you only have these temporary pockets of advancement in society. So what happened with this go around is the aliens started coming back in now that humanity had enough time to kind of grow on its own accord and have science and technology and everything catch back up to where they could begin to understand some of these techniques, to where they could go through their own self-awareness process. And it might be a slower process that may take years for someone to achieve, but if you can do this step by step on your own, not only can you achieve it, not only can you hold the space, but now you can teach other people how to do it. And we believe that every single person that rises up has an exponential increase of an effect on the planet. It's not a one-to-one correspondence. So one person can affect a full state or several areas or regions just by their consciousness. It actually has been measured that you actually do produce an electro potential outside of your body based upon your thought processes, your patterns, your level of consciousness. And when you're around other people, people begin to pick up on that. So the more people that are out there with higher states of consciousness, the more that it will actually begin to spread throughout the rest of the population and the planet and help to stabilize the group effort of the consciousness of the planet and population and the earth increasing over time. So we believe this is a very important work that we're doing here. So we're really helpful. We're really grateful for this conference being put together. So we go back to understanding why the human being is important for the ascension process. Let's talk about what happens with the bell curve. So in statistics, you have a bell curve and it follows along a path where most, like 97%, lies at within that gap. And then of course you have outliers that are above the mean and then that are below the mean. Well, this is the same thing that's true with consciousness bands. So you have a spike wherein most of the population in that dimension or that band set lies within that area or that peak, which means that that alien group or that consciousness group is bounded by the lowest member and the highest member, and they're kind of locked into place. And once they're there, yes, you have with the collective consciousness, you have tremendous ability of accessing everything for the whole collective, but you're limited by how much you can grow. So what they determined was they need to find a vessel that the vessel could temporarily feel as though it had its own separate consciousness, but was still tied into the collective, so that as the vessel was growing on its own, it would not be bounded by the collective's growth limitations. And then once they came back and joined the collective will be boosted just a little bit more, because every time you move that curve over to the right by each individual slowly reconvening back with the collective curve is growing or increasing and shifting to the right. So I hope that that concept makes sense from a statistical standpoint. So what they did was they came to Earth, and there are multiple groups of extraterrestrials. I mean, there are countless. There's not just the grays that are out there. That's a whole other conversation of understanding and looking at various cultures and civilizations and the different extraterrestrial origins that they have. That's been documented by a lot of different people. But every being down here came with a consciousness seed, which means that alien race came down here. They genetically manipulated the native hominids on the planet that was here, and they created a hybrid. So it was not a natural evolution that took place from the native hominids all the way up to Homo sapiens and higher forms of human beings growing over time. So when that occurred, the consciousness of the alien, they would pick a person, usually somewhere within the middle of the gap, because you don't want to send your highest person out because you'll handicap them. You're not going to send your lowest person out because they won't be able to weather the transition. So they send people that are usually in the middle of the tier down into the human body, and they lock them in. So that consciousness gets seeded into this vessel, which now you understand that when you're working as a human, you have the consciousness of your vessel, and you have the consciousness of the person working inside the vessel, which is the body, the soul, and the spirit perspective. So when you're working through this understanding, you understand that even though your alien origin consciousness might be at the 18th chakra or the 30th chakra, whatever higher level of consciousness that comes in, when you come in and you start at the first, because you have to start with an impeccable foundation. So when these human beings came into the body, and the goal was to create an illusion of being on their own, that means that you have to forget everything when you come in. If you remember everything from your higher self when you come in, it kind of is a moot point, because you'll understand everything and you won't be able to grow, and you can only grow by basically being in a video game where you feel like this life is your only life. This is where you have specific things in plot process when you create your contract that this is what you want to learn. And then learning and growing and changing, your consciousness has a chance to grow, and that gets boosted and transferred to your origin consciousness. The problem came in when people came into this body and they forgot. Well, they start to forget where they came from, and they got locked in the human body. And so now you begin to be locked into repetitive states of reincarnation, repetitive states of being lost. And so you have people sending out more and more and more of the group as humanity began to grow. And over time, humanity began to have its own consciousness band that began to be distinct and separate from that of the alien band. So we have several problems that we're working against. So the first thing that you have to realize is that even though you're in this body and that you have an origin consciousness, number one, you probably don't remember your origin consciousness. Number two, when they try to interact with you, you're so caught up in your human experience that you're blocking out everything else that's trying to interact with you on a conscious level. When people are children, let me clarify a common myth. So a lot of people think that you have to be special to have clairaudient abilities or clairsentient abilities or whatever type of clair you may have. But these are all natural senses that are natural for every person. So each person may have a different way that they express themselves, just like there are some people who are better communicators and those who are better at understanding science and those who are better at understanding art. But these are your spiritual senses. And this is how you communicate with the spirit world around you. But you've been tapped into what it means to be normal for so long that you have forgotten how to use your natural abilities, and you have merge into the human way of being, of normalcy, of what's expected of you, and these expectations and patterns and karmic cycles have locked you into a process that prevents you from seeing above the veil. So the first thing that we do when we work with an individual is we help them to pierce the veil. What happens when we pierce the veil is we don't use any type of hallucinogenic or anything or deep meditation process, which you can use to help kind of pierce and get you over that hump, but it's not sustainable because it becomes a crutch. I mean, it becomes something that you have to rely on to get beyond that state every time. So you naturally cross between the veil, which exists between the conscious and the conscious and the unconscious mind when you go to sleep. So we begin to naturally teach you how to access that place between sleep and awake while you are in a conscious state of being. And over time, your brain begins to hold that space naturally so that you can bridge the gap while you are in the waking world. Once you begin to get to that point in that process, we then teach you how to begin to use your awareness body, which is not your physical body, but your unconscious mind, and that part of you that's the God self that can interact with anything on any level outside of your body. This is what allows remote viewing. This is what allows people to do psychic readings. This is what allows traveling, because there's a part of you that is separate from your body. And that's what you are working with. That is what will go and journey with plants. And that begins with the first kingdom of consciousness. So that's the first consciousness band, and that corresponds to the red frequency, which is the lowest frequency of the visible light spectrum. That's going to be your nature, your plants, your mosses, your algae. And you go through and you have a journeying experience, which sounds really crazy, but with every individual species group of plant. And after you journey with that, you begin to add that to your collective consciousness band, because the whole God experience is not about being above something so that it can lord over it. It's about becoming everything throughout all the consciousness consciousness band so that you exist across the whole continuum. And also, once you get to that point, you become nothing, meaning that you're not defined by any one individual experience. So God is able to interact with everything on every level through any vessel that he, it, she needs to interact with, because it is a humongous collective of everything in existence. So you're basically remembering the process of what it means to be tapped into the whole continuum of everything. After you begin to interact with plants, the next step up from that would be insects, and then you go to viruses, and you go up and up and up and up through the different kingdoms of consciousness that we learned about through the alien species. And at some point, your alien origin family will come in and begin the abduction process. And this is the same for every single person. For some, it's a little bit earlier. For some, it's a little bit later. The main thing is they don't want to come in and work with the person until, number one, they're really able to consciously see beyond the veil, because if you're not going to remember when they interact with you. And if you can't remember and act with them on a conscious level, you won't be able to grow, because you can't. If that was the case, people could grow in their dreams and be different, and that's not happening. Number two, they don't want you to be frightened of the process. And all the origin consciousness out there are not humanoid. So if your origin consciousness may look like an insect or something else, it might really well freak you out, and your fear will prevent you from opening up to that experience. So the biggest mantra that we use in our path is, we do not let fear control us. You must access things where fear is involved, because fear will help to protect what we call your mortality. So you have been conditioned to believe that because you're only this one existence, there's only this one incarnation, all your memory is pointing to preserving your body. And the spiritual process is one where you de-emphasize the importance of the physical body, so that you can realize that you are much more than just this one existence. So your origin consciousness starts to come in with you and then begin that abduction experience. And when you are exposed to that higher level of consciousness, you naturally begin to experience a lifting back to what is your normal consciousness range. And they actually reshape your consciousness, which means they help your consciousness to avoid with being identified only with the human existence, to being able to begin to start tapping back into that collective experience. And once you collect into that collective experience, you change your perspective. So we recognize that there are four main perspectives. There's a first person perspective, a second person, a third person perspective, and the fourth person perspective, which we call the God perspective. And that's where the whole idea of the concept of omniscience comes in. So omniscience is nothing more than having your emotional response completely removed from the situation, so that you are able to view everything from an unbiased perspective and interact with it as a puppeteer, rather than the person that's playing a part of the individual experience. So that's what the alien consciousness regrouping helps you to achieve. Do you want to jump back in on explaining more about how the alien consciousness remolding process works?
I would love to, Franz. You're doing such an amazing job. You should continue.
So once the consciousness remolding process is complete, you then begin to be exposed to a lot of other things. So people think that the end all be all are ghosts on this planet, or spirits, or all of these things. And yes, you'll begin to interact with them. You'll begin to interact with plants. You'll begin to interact with the weather. You'll begin to learn how to actually interact with people that exist in multiple periods of time, because the interesting thing is that time and space don't exist in the spirit world. So when you interact with, let's say, for instance, ghosts in one area, they are actually in that concurrent time loop that is still going on, and it's in their presence. So you have a blur over that. And that's the same thing with all dimensions, is that they're on top of each other. So as your awareness grows, your aura grows, and it does in fact become larger. But as you interact with more things, you're able to begin to see the boundaries between the dimensions. And so you begin to have an experience in multiple levels. So when you walk outside of your door, you're not just seeing the regular world that everybody else is seeing. You're now seeing all the plants and the nature spirits. You're now seeing the ghosts. You're now seeing the higher entities. You're now seeing the angelic beings. You're now seeing the aliens. You're now seeing all of these things, and your awareness will continue to grow. Keeping in mind that whatever level your awareness reaches, you can only really interact with things or maybe about up to 3 levels higher than you. So the first rule that we follow is you want to grow your awareness as much as possible, as quickly as possible, but slow enough to allow your body to catch up. because you are still a physical being, and you can't just grow without allowing your body to catch up to this whole process of growth, because you'll come out of sync, and that increases the chance for psychosis, that increases the chance for being unstable, that increases the chance for not being able to be down here on this planet. And that's the mistake that a lot of people make, is they want to dedicate their life to a lot of spiritual growth, but if you don't have the physical balance to balance that out, you can't have a normal life. You can't pay your bills. You can't experience happiness and bliss. You can't experience being balanced. And you're supposed to have a fulfilled life, because having the God experience means that your life is incredible on every level, that you no longer are a victim to your circumstance, but you're able to change it, that you can actually manifest things on a powerful level, but that you understand responsibility, that you understand truth, and that you work in integrity in everything that you do. Because a bigger secret out there is that if you want to grow, you have to give up your power. And when I say that, it means you're not seeking to gain abilities to control other people, but you're seeking to become more of what you are, to grow in responsibility and integrity and in truth. Because there's always something higher than you that's out there watching you to see, are you ready for the next step? Are they going to come in and work with you? Are they going to avail you to higher consciousness? Are you going to handle the power responsibly? And if you don't, that will allow for something to come in to basically control your move you in a different direction. And as soon as you do that, you will hit a plateau. You'll be very powerful, but you will not achieve the growth that you could have achieved if you had stuck to a path of peace, truth, and integrity. So after you begin interacting with aliens, we're probably about the 2-year mark in at this process, you will eventually get to the 7th chakra in consciousness, and that's where your true ascension process takes place. So that's what we recognize as the Christ consciousness. So when we talk about the importance of the Christ, we're not talking about the importance of Jesus per se, but we're talking about a band of consciousness, which corresponds to, if you follow Kabbalah or the Tree of Life or mathematics, and you think about Tiferet, it is the gateway through which all the other parts of ascension are possible, because now that is the first portion that aligns up with the collective experience or universal truth. And you have now shed off a lot of your patterns, a lot of your humanity, and you're able to comprehend the fact that you are more than just this body. Because remember, consciousness identifies with what the individual thinks itself to be. So as long as you only think yourself to be just a human experience, you are in effect trapping your own consciousness to only filtering out all the other experiences and being focused in tunnel vision only on the human experience. So things could be trying to get your attention for years and you never know because you're consciously blocking it out. At the 7th chakra level, you start going through higher and higher alien forms. Once you get beyond the 12th chakra levels, when you start getting into things like the ascendant masters, higher level spirits, higher level journeying, what people might consider heaven, what people might consider angelic beings, and keeping in mind that as you go up each level, nothing is your God. You are also a part of God, and everything else knows that, because they sent you down into this body because they knew that you had the greatest chance opportunity to be able to grow. But because you don't remember it, it's like coming in and taking advantage of a person who has amnesia and saying, well, this person's here, maybe I can kind of coerce them to my side so that they can work for my team instead of their origins team. And this is why it's important whenever you're growing to work with people that you trust, or to work with the master or a guide who has been to where you are going through, so that they can resolve anything that comes up for you. Because when you're going through this path, everything, even though it's a remembering process, will be new to you because you've forgotten it. So you begin interacting with all of these higher beings, and the first thing we say is, you don't want to interact with something that tries to say that you have debt to it, that you owe it, and that in exchange for helping you grow, you're going to need to do X, Y, and Z for it. Because anything that really is of the light is going to empower you and not going to want to control you, keep you down, or have something that holds over your head. Because that doesn't help anyone at all. So we want everybody to understand part of this process. We teach and talk about spiritual etiquette in this process. We talked about a lot. I want to just pause for questions really quickly before we move on to the process of understanding how you work through the techniques and how you're able to move up through the progressive chains of consciousness on the ascension process or pathway.
Neil?
Okay, I don't see any hands raising or anything else in chat. So we will go ahead and continue. All right, so some of the process that you experience is after you reach a certain point on the consciousness pathway, you will enter into what's known as the tunnel. And the tunnel is a period where it's the last portion where you will begin to shave off the last remaining vestiges of your humanity. And in this process, you will go through extreme emotional ups and downs. You will experience a part of yourself that you never knew was there, because it will help you to be cleansed of all of your previous consciousness. And at that point, you have the choice to be able to access what is going to be your next new vessel. So when we talk about vessels, we're not talking about, oh, you're now going to be an angel, or now you're going to be the alien. You are, remember, first and foremost, awareness first that is acting through a vessel or a particular body so that you can interact with a specific band of consciousness. So when you reach a new vessel after you transcended the seventh chakra, you now need a new vessel so that you can interact with things that are higher on that awareness level. And that's when you get your first major large vessel. That vessel will allow you to interact with higher beings and higher consciousness at that point. There's several different points in the path that you can take veer-offs, depending on what's appropriate for your own path and your viewpoint. But overall, the process is the same for everyone after that. Once you finish that, it takes me about another 5 years or so to finish the ascension process to where you get to the 18th chakra. And at the 18th chakra is where you get into the I am experience, or the whole God experience, what people consider to be God. And these are just spirits at such a high level that most of them are non-physical beings. Most of them are beings of energy. Most of them are beings of light that exist in different frequency band patterns. We have a person here in the Q&A. Hold on. Someone wrote, Dan Winter spoke of non-corporeal intelligences that originate and or enter our solar system via the sun are from the right side of the tracks, and that aliens that enter our solar not via the sun are from the wrong side of the tracks. How do we know if we are working with the good guys?
That's a great question.
Well, the first thing we teach people is you want to know the right questions to ask.
Yes.
So everything can try to deceive you. The best way to deceive you is to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So the first question you ask is, are you unconditionally positive to my experience and in my truth?
What does that mean for us?
So that means that when you are growing as an individual, something that's unconditionally positive means that it is going to support you and be in alignment with what you are ready, capable for handling, and it's going to lead you in a process of your growth. If it's not unconditionally positive, it means it's going to cause a lot of change from what you consider the truth to be. And there are 4 main answers that you can hear to that question. You can hear yes, which means that it won't really provide any growth for you, but it will help to support you on your path in a positive manner. You can hear no, which is you should not work with that being or that entity, because it's going to steer you from where you need to be, and it's going to try to manipulate or control you. The third question is actually, the third answer is actually the most positive one, which is yes and no. When you hear yes and no, it means yes, we are going to support you in your growth, but no at the same time, in that by working with us, you will expand beyond your current limitations of comfort to know more, experience more, and so your version of the truth will change as you grow. And the last answer is silence, which means they're trying to deceive you by not giving you an answer at all. You need to run and take off like the wind. Before you ask these questions, though, the first thing to remember is that spirits play by a different rule than we do.
There is a spiritual etiquette. Go ahead.
So the first thing you want to think about is the person that responds first has to speak per the truth of the other party. So this is why when you encounter poltergeists, this is why when you encounter other spirits, whether it's a demon or whatever else, you don't want to say, who is that? What is that? They're trying to get your attention so that if they can spook you, number one, if you're afraid, you won't be using all your mental faculties, and they'll be better able to pull a quick one over your eyes. And number two, if you respond first, they now have locked you into where they can lie to you, and they only have to respond to you based upon what's true for them, not upon what's true for you. So that as you go up, you realize that just like in elementary school, you learn that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. But when you get into differential equations and higher mathematics, you learn about imaginary numbers and that there's different unities that are possible. So there's different versions of the truth that are able to be shared on different levels. You want to make sure that they're speaking on a level that you can understand and that they're not lying to you. So what you'll do is you will allow them to speak first to you, and you will just sit there. And if eventually they want to communicate with you, they'll respond back to you first.
What technique do we use to get them to speak first?
So the technique that we use is called the mirror technique. So what you do is you imagine that instead of your physical body, because you're not your body, that right in front of you is a 3-dimensional hologram mirror. And that hologram takes the image or the likeness of the thing that is speaking to you, or the thing that's trying to get your attention. And as soon as that being sees something that looks like itself.
Why do we use a mirror to show a 3-dimensional reflection of what's interacting with us?
Because it will, number one, it'll build a level of respect because you're showing that you're going to talk to it from its perspective. Number 2, it will feel non-threatened. And number 3, it also makes you less of a nobody. Because if they see that you're on their level, they will communicate with you on their level, and they will treat you more as an equal and not as somebody that's beneath them.
Yes.
So when that has been established, they will usually talk first back to you as soon as you've shown that picture. And once they speak with you and open up engagement, it's when you can begin to ask these questions. That should help you. And that nothing else, you can always trust your gut. Your gut's going to always be 99.9% accurate. And your gut is not your intuition. There is a difference.
There's a huge difference. And this is a big mistake for people that get into all the clear abilities or the clear audience, the clear sentient. When you deal with higher consciousness, let's take a step back. You're dealing with lower consciousness, below the 7th chakra. Intuition is amazing. When you deal with love and light, intuition is amazing. It's on point 99% of the time. But when you get a higher consciousness and higher awareness, intuition is no longer on point. Here we must use gut instinct and discerning. And discerning allows us, we have a whole list of scientific techniques that we use on a psychic or an awareness level that allows us to discern a greater level of truth, to discern consciousness, to discern memory, to discern energy, and to actually see within their memory what they are portraying versus what they are interacting with you. So you're able to see what is not readily available. Where intuition, the moment you use intuition and you try and connect with or try and look intuitively towards what you're interacting with, they will sense the energy coming forward intuitively, and they can implant memory or implant false positives. Therefore, intuitive becomes inaccurate. Well, we use gut instinct and discerning, and it's 100% accurate, or nearly 100% accurate.
We have another question that says, if you get to a certain level, is it possible that the powers that be can see you as a threat and try to immobilize you? I would say that keep in mind that there's multiple powers that be. So there's not necessarily just only one spirit that's up there running the show. There exist spirits at every level of awareness or every consciousness gap.
So this is really important to understand when you are coming up. Are you walking in the light, or are you walking in darkness? If you're walking in light in peace, truth, integrity, and respect, you're doing it not to gain power over others, but to empower you yourself. You will always have higher energy beings, 2, 3, 4 levels above you, that are going to be watching over you. Just like on a human level, we have guardian angels. As you come into higher level stuff, we have higher stuff that's watching over us. If you happen to be walking in darkness, which is not peace, not truth, not integrity, you're not respecting others, you're seeking to control other people, you are going to be inviting negative energies that come in to control you, and therefore to those energies you're going to be a threat.
Okay, is it top.org or .com?
What's that?
The website .com, isn't it?
Which one?
Science of Ascension.
.com.
I want to also say, I really appreciate Marina from saying that you need to hold a vibration of love at all times, or the frequency of love at all times. This is important, but what you have to realize is that frequency is not just on your thoughts, it actually becomes encoded in your aura. So your aura is actually the history of all of your thought patterns. It is the history of all of your ways of being. So when entities interact with you, they already can see. This is why higher level spirits, you can't really lie to them, because they can see in your aura what your intent is, what your past amounts of interactions have been, because universal language of the universe is not words, it's light. And the closest thing that we have to approximate with that is with pictures. So when you're communicating with the spirit, you are going to want to speak back to it with the telepathy, with pictures of what you're communicating, because the spirit may not know English, it may not know Croatian, it may not know Spanish, but it's going to recognize from the pictures that you're conveying the light frequencies that are coming across, and eventually you will learn to speak in light as you work with the aliens, so that you can communicate back with everything on a universal level. This is what allows things to, instead of having a long conversation, they can just transmit over a frequency band that contains, like a computer, all the information encoded in one small piece or one small frequency range, and you don't have to use as many words. But again, all of this is encoded in your aura. So this is why it's important to start building a positive reputation for yourself. And we also believe in law of attraction. So what you will repel the opposite and attract similar things to you. So the more that you walk in peace, truth, and integrity, and with the intention and the vibration of love and integrity, the more that you will repel negative entities away from you that are trying to seek and control you. That doesn't mean that you'll never be tempted. That doesn't mean that you'll never have things trying to steer you on the right direction. But as long as you know that you are your own best master, you are your own best teacher, and your gut will always lead you down the right path, you will be less likely to be swayed to something that's not for your benefit. For, you were saying that's for the website. Yes, we do have a website. It is scienceofascension.com. And we have a comment from Janet that says, you were thinking lower down like those doing remote viewing. So people that are remote viewers, understand that there are remote viewers are everywhere all the time. We are not going to get into on this subject talking about government conspiracies or any of that thing, because what you focus on and what you hold attention on, you draw more of that to you. So we have seen firsthand people that really get too heavily involved in what the government is doing and remote viewing and what they're doing, that it really doesn't become something very positive for you. You actually gain attention on yourself, and you don't want to be in that attention. You want to fly beneath the radar as much as possible. So that's what we believe is the best way of protection as far as when it comes to that. So the more that you show that you are just a person that is a regular being, that's not a threat, that you're working with people that walk in peace, truth, and integrity, the less likely you'll be seen as an object to control or take out. Okay, any other questions before we move on this? All right, keep in mind we're keeping an eye on the chat.
That's the correct website.
We'll take a look at the website when we're done with this, Kaylin, but it should work, and we'll do a screen share before we log off to make sure that everyone can see the right one. Thank you so much, Kaylin. We'll make sure that that is working correctly for you guys. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what my experience has been. So we believe first and foremost that anything that is a pathway or a process is based upon a science and not based upon anything that's woo-woo, and that it is something that can be repeatable, give the same results for anyone, whoever is using it. So I came in, and my background in undergraduate is I studied Latin and Greek translation and also chemistry and chemical engineering. So I came in from a very scientific background with both left and right brains open, and I was always very psychic as a child. I was always whatever, clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyant. I was able to do all of those things. I interacted with spirits, but it scared me. I shut most of that down, and it didn't start opening back up for me until college, when I was having alien abductions before I met Joe, and I didn't know they were alien abductions. A lot of those symptoms for me were I would wake up and I would have sleep paralysis. Which means that I would be working the overnight shift from midnight to 8 a.m. And every morning by about like 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd find myself falling asleep, and I'd have this incredible sense of drowsiness come over me, and I would not know how to stay awake. And then I would wake up, I would feel like several hours later, maybe only a few minutes had passed, and I would have thought I would have been out for hours. And when I was coming back into my body, I couldn't move anything, I couldn't talk, I was fully aware, but I couldn't move my body. I could not interact with anyone, and I felt like I was screaming on the inside and no one could hear me. So that was a really scary process for me, and this happened for about a year. And then after that happened, I started seeing shadows of things moving in my room, and I started feeling like I was feeling people touching me through different parts of the day, and I thought I was going nuts. I thought I was going crazy. So that's what prompted me to start reopening my abilities, because I had shut it all down to enter in corporate America, live a normal life. But when you've been called to a path of spiritual growth, and when you realize that this is right for you, the universe is going to get your attention one way or another. And it's up to you with how much of a response is it going to take before you get the call and you start looking for the tools and resources available that are right for you, or are you going to stay a sleepwalking person through life? So I met Joe through the craziest of things. I'm telling you, I found a flyer in the parking lot that blew across my car that talked about meetup.com. I went on meetup.com and I signed up. And right there, the very first thing that came up had to do with a meditation group about learning how to interact with the plants around you and getting in touch with your local guardian energy. So this sounds really crazy, but my gut told me you need to be there. And I said, I'm going to use an explicative. I hope that's okay with everyone. I said, fuck that. I'm not doing that. And I could not have it leave me alone. And so when you have continuous guidance that comes up repeatedly in a small voice in you, you know it's something that you need to listen to. So I went to the group and I went on what Joe calls a group journey experience. So one of the abilities that you learn on this path is you're able to envelop your aura around someone else and around a group of people to lift them up so that they all have the same experience. And so when you're journeying, that doesn't matter if a person has a lower ability psychically or whether a person is not able to see things as clearly, you temporarily lift them up to a level so that they all can experience and see it firsthand for themselves. And he did not tell anybody what they were going to experience. He goes, we're just going to go to the forest away from here, and I'm going to introduce you to the guardians. I'm not going to tell you all what they look like, what they're going to talk to you about, and I want you all to, when we come back from this experience, tell me what you saw. Every single person in the group saw the same thing. They all saw the same trolls. They all had the same kind of conversations. They all had the same experience, which led me to believe this has to be real, because there's no way in a room full of 30 people that every single person saw, felt, experienced something, interacted with this tree, interacted with these plants, and had something that was an experience that you think would be crazy without anyone giving them any guidance beforehand. And that's when I started working with Joe and started really moving up from there. So part of my process is being psychically inclined can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. And the way that it can be a curse is when you're used to interacting with your world around you through a specific way, it's hard to let go of that. And every time you come to a new consciousness level, you have a dying process. And that dying process, most spirits recognize that as a period of regrowth and rebirth. What happens is you have to let go of all the knowledge that you've accumulated up to that point, because on a higher level, those things that you learned beforehand, which were great for the previous level, can't be taken into that next level with you. And that's what really stunts a lot of people from their growth process in the future, is that they aren't willing to let go of the things that worked for them in the past.
So just to give you an example, every time I go through higher levels in this renewal process, it's called what we termed, or what science has termed, a near-death experience. And that's technically what this is. You go through the near-death experience to access that new perspective, that full perspective. You have to let go of your old perspective and all the abilities with it. And how you know if the person you're working with has reached mastery, have they reached a level of ascension, have they gotten into higher level abilities and higher level experiences. About 6 months ago, we started a process called Club 4, the Fountain of Youth. And I found a way to adjust your spirit, or just my spirit, Fonda's spirit, and the other people we have in the group, and you actually go through a process of becoming younger. It heals the body. It calms the body. And included in this process, we're also able to identify how the body holds stress. And on a monthly basis relieve that stress. So people are temporarily relieved of all the patterns that negatively define them, so the body itself becomes the healer. The body itself, where we are cleaning that filter that has become clogged of all our emotional, our mental, our spiritual stress, our negative patterns, our limiting patterns that hold us back. Franz has talked about, and he's such a great speaker in explaining everything, when you look at children, children don't have a clogged filter, and they heal at an incredible rate. They renew at an incredible rate. They are, as their body ages, they are still being very, very young. And once you clear this filter out, you get attuned to this higher vibration we call the fountain of youth. This process allows the body to heal itself, to regenerate itself in an incredible process. I mean, it's really, really amazing. We started a Facebook page called Club 4. It's actually a private page right now, where we're trying to work with people to see how this affects. And there's about 8 levels of this fountain of youth stuff. Very, very powerful. We're using it for people with chronic pain, and it's just incredible how it works. It's really amazing.
And part of the way that Joe came across this process is a lot of alien beings in the beginning, they're not, well, let's talk about physical beings, because there are physical and non-physical aliens. So aliens that have a physical body, that body at some point is going to need a regeneration process. So they're not necessarily what you think of as immortal. They don't live forever, but when the body gets to a certain point in which it ages, it goes into almost like a comatose state, and it goes into, and they apply the same level of technology to the body to basically roll the clock back on the body, and the body begins to regenerate and re-heal itself. While the body is going through that process, the consciousness in that body has to go somewhere else. So this is when you have a further process where the ancient aliens that were down here would temporarily put the consciousness of that person in a human body, and for them it was almost like a vacation process while that body was going through a healing process. Well, unfortunately, a lot of things out there only care about power and control. So you recognize that your cousin or your uncle or your father is asleep in this process, or if like from Norse mythology, the Odin sleep or whatever you want to call it, well, they may pull the plug on your consciousness and trap you into that human body. And now you now have even more aliens that are sucked down here in a human body perspective and can't get back up again. So
this is where working with the higher aliens and the higher brethren, which I now in my ascension process consider them to be my children, they have shared not technology, but actual science of not the mind, but in this case, awareness and consciousness to influence. So, and we're always looking at the main tenets of the work we do is you have to have health, you have to have wealth, you have to have growth on this path, you have to have full fulfillment. This path is not about a very closed viewpoint. It's about an open viewpoint. It's about love and light. It's about peace and truth. It's about integrity. It's about empowerment. It's about complete empowerment. A part of our empowerment is having a longevity of life so we can achieve more.
I want to answer this comment from Susan, who says that years ago I experienced sleep paralysis frequently. And one of the things that we learn when you encounter alien beings is, in addition to the questions that we talked about, you also can ask them, how is this related to my contract, and can you help me to remember it? And that shows them that you're ready to interact with them on a higher level for your growth, and that you're not just a sheep or not just a person for them to experiment on or to work on in a negative manner, and now you become an asset. And because you become an asset that's ready to grow, they will do what they can to assist you and facilitate your growth process. The other thing is that we don't subscribe to necessarily any one religious philosophy or principle. We believe that there are slivers of truth scattered across multiple philosophies. And one of the philosophies that we found a sliver of truth in is in the Sikh religion, there's a phrase called Ek Onkar Satnam Siriwahe Guru. And you can Google that, and the Sikhs do this prayer every morning between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And when you chant this over a period of time, it's basically an affirmation saying that you are God. And the more and more you believe that for yourself to be that you are God, the more and more it becomes your truth, and it resonates in your consciousness and in your aura, so you no longer have to do this chant. So it takes about doing this 30 days for 30 minutes a day, between that hour, nonstop for a continuous portion. And as you habitually do things, just like any pattern of behavior, it becomes encoded in your aura. So any being that encounters you, they already see that pattern of behavior in your belief system. So they change how they interact with you on a higher level. And that usually will also stop the sleep paralysis from occurring, because they will now interact with you more on an equal level, and you will also be willing to accept a higher experience because you're training yourself to experience things on a higher vibrational frequency. So I hope that helped answer your question, Susan. There's a lot of other symptoms of alien abductions. The first one is, keep in mind that aliens can also abduct people both physically and spiritually. So just because your consciousness can travel outside of your body, they can take a portion of your consciousness onto the ship, and be able to interact with you through your dreams. So you start having dreams of family reunions, and you see relatives, people who look like family, even if you don't recognize them, but you know in your heart that they are family, and you have in your gut feeling that they're good and that they're there to support you. A lot of times that's your alien family that's there to show you and say, hey, I'm here, we're ready to work with you, and you're ready to work with us. You may start having visions of being in examination rooms, or feeling like you're getting a medical checkup, or you're at the doctor's office, or you will see people who are maybe like middle size, maybe about 3 feet tall, somewhere around there. Those will typically be reminiscent of the grays that interact with people. The interesting thing is, on this path, we can talk to you about this all day long, but what the magic is when you experience this for yourself. Because all this is about self-experience, from whether it's you actually can interact with the Pleiadians, you actually can interact with the Greys, you actually can interact with the ant people that live in the center of the planet, you actually can interact with the ultra-terrestrials, but it's all about, do you know the proper protocol? Are you able to be at a level where you can intelligibly correspond with them? Because if you're trying to interact with something that's 15 levels above you and you don't have the consciousness to sustain that, it's like a baby trying to talk to you and it's all jibber jabber. So we help people to awaken and sustain their own growth so that they can interact with higher consciousness. And you're no longer a puppet, but now you're able to have an equal playing field and truly grow from there.
I just want to add something. It's very important that you understand, when you are working with any higher energy out there, and they say they're going to ask you, they're going to impose upon you who stands with you, who around you supports you, you're going to go into the mindset with, the greatest physical master that I'm ever going to encounter is myself, you. You are your greatest physical master. Why? Because being a master, and I consider myself a high-level master, is not being a master of other people. It's about being a better student of everything. So really, when I say I'm a master, I'm really an incredible student. And I'm a student that kneels before and attempts to uplift all of those around me. So you are a master, and the greatest teacher you're going to encounter is life, your personal experience. That's the greatest teacher you're going to have. Somebody like what I do, or what others out there do, are facilitators. We're really guides. And what a guide does is it helps you understand everything that's going on. And in your understanding, you have clarity about what is happening. It's no different than you work with people who do healing work. The real healer is you yourself, the client. That's the healer. What somebody like myself does, and can I do incredible stuff? Sure. But you're not empowered if I do the work for you. You're empowered if I help you understand and help you realize that the miracles for healing are inside of you. And that's the same thing with this path. The miracles of this path, of ascension, of love and light, is an internal process. The light and the way is within you. And everybody can access this.
One of the other things I want to talk about is, as you come up, a lot of the abilities that we talk about really have to start seeing things from an energetic perspective. So you've seen the matrix, and you see that sheet of code that runs up and down on the beginning of the screen with the ones and zeros and data. You actually will have experiences where you will start to see that as you interact with different things. That will be what we call codes, or what we call an imprint of the energy process of that being, because everybody is made up of a frequency, of vibration, of energy, of light patterns. You'll start getting into understanding quantum physics, keeping in mind that I find quantum physics very interesting from the whole perspective of your body is made up of atoms, your body is made up of electrons and protons, and the fact that the electrons are always popping in and out of existence and going into other dimensions all the time, which currently also further means that the idea that you are an interdimensional being is very valid, because a large portion of your body is multiple places, and it's only the process of you being focused on this only existence that holds you here only on this one existence. So we talk more about that. You start to, when you read a book, because the book is not words, the book is an actual imprint of the consciousness of the person who wrote it and the sources that they were channeling as they wrote that material, because people tap into the collective consciousness of humanity and other beings all the time. That's where you start getting a lot of the fantasy and a lot of inventors and a lot of things they're drawing from this well of information that already exists outside of time and space, and they're tapping into that. So you'll be able to see a book and read through and see the consciousness that's going through as a code, and be able to see how much of it stacks up with your truth, how much of it is fluff, how much of it, so you can call BS on things that you come across, because you now are able to be your own guide, your own master, your own teacher. You'll learn how to interact with the weather patterns, how to interact with plants. You can actually help plants to grow much more quickly. You can actually learn how to communicate with trees. And that's one of the things that we found very helpful from Druidry and other shamanic religions, is that nature is the gateway to growth, because it helps you to understand, number one, being in balance with yourself and your environment. Number two, understanding that you're part of something larger than yourself, which is the collective experience. And number three, helping to reawaken you to your natural communication abilities, which are not words, but are through feelings, light, and energy. So that's where everyone starts off regardless, and that's what's going to give you the greatest growth potential. I really think that's the main points we really want to talk about. We're going to just open the floor up to questions. Definitely raise your hand. Any questions you may have about your own experiences, we want to be a resource for you guys.
I don't have a question. I just want to raise my hand.
Oh, okay.
You did great today, man.
Let's see. I'll make sure I got all the questions through here. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Janet. I really appreciate that comment. I hope this has been really helpful to everyone else as well. Like I said, let's go and get that website up and make sure that you all can see it. Just a minute. How did the domain expire?
Go to www. I don't think the domain expired. At least I hope it didn't.
If so, we still have all the information on there.
Wow. I guess the domain expired. That's crazy.
Okay, so we will contact the web host today. In the meantime, what you can do is we do have a copy of everything that's on there with the ebooks. You can send an email to scienceofascension@yahoo.com with any emails or questions that you have. The website should probably be back up in about another 24 to 48 hours.
Or probably Monday.
Or Monday, we'll contact the web provider and make sure that that gets put back up immediately. Well, Luann, if you haven't had any experience of ETs, if you decide to look more into this info, you definitely will. And that's the key, is most people have had contact with ETs, they just don't remember it. So you will learn how to cultivate in your consciousness, how to actually remember what happens in your dreams, how to go through the lucid dreaming process, and how to interact with higher degrees of consciousness as they interact with you. I think I just encourage everybody to experiment. You know, go with what feels right for you. Don't be afraid to get all these books on things, and don't feel like you have to subscribe to one person's method over your own, but everybody's like an acorn, and you come in here with all the potential and all of the gut ability to know what you need to grow into the oak tree. So learn how to tap into your own discernment, learn how to know what it is that you truly need. And the biggest things for growth is being honest with yourself above all other people, so that once you understand your own perspectives, you understand your own life patterns that are holding you down, you understand what it is that you need for your own growth and your own fulfillment.
Excuse me, Mikey. As Mike was talking about earlier about how he first crossed paths, trust your gut. If you have fear, you know what? You're always going to have fear of an experience that you don't remember, you don't understand, or is seemingly new. The reality, or a greater reality, is that you are this cosmos experience. You are this God experience. You just don't remember it. And the process of ascension is a remembering process. Everything out there knows that you are this divine spark, that you are all the way up at the top, or you're connected to all the way up at the top through higher consciousness, even if you don't have awareness of it. But they also know you don't know. They also know humans have no memory of it. Therefore, they're going to try and use fear in some circumstances. Don't subscribe to the fear. You are more than that.
We have another question from Roman. May I ask your opinion on vegetarianism versus being an omnivore? Is being a vegetarian more in keeping with Ascension? I'll give you my viewpoint, and I'll let Joe give his viewpoint. I believe instead of subscribing to absolute right or wrongs, you have to do what's right for you and your body and your nutrition. I do believe that having a conscious, healthy diet will support you. So, number one, knowing where your food comes from. As many times as you're able to make a choice to buy food that you know had humane treatment as much as possible, would help you to understand and have a thankfulness and a gratitude. I really believe in the Native American practice of giving gratitude for really what you eat and knowing where it came from. So that's what I believe. I go on vegetarian diets every once in a while for cleanses, for health benefits, but I am an omnivore and it hasn't stopped my own process.
Vegetarian versus omnivore, man, I love meat, but I use vegetarian for a yearly cleanse. And sometimes I do a juicing fast. Sometimes I'll do a month cleanse of just vegetarian to cleanse the body out. I'm nearing 50, so I really try and take very good care of my body, and a cleanse on a regular basis is very helpful. I don't think it has any effect on the ascension process because we're not our bodies. Our bodies are tethered here. What we are is so much more on an energetic level.
We have another question talking about overcoming feeling of going crazy several years ago. I'm having lots of phobias and feeling that the fear was constant, and how to overcome that to not go through that again.
That's very difficult without seeing a picture of you to identify at the time what the issues were affecting you, if it was spiritual, psychic, energetic, emotional, mental. I can't give you a possible answer on that. I would like to say it's energetic. And we know that when people go into a pose, they view the spiritual enlightenment as this yoga posture. But the reality of spiritual enlightenment, or the process of going through it, is exactly what you're describing. It's a sense of going crazy. Oh my God, this can't be happening. It's not real. That is the real spiritual process that you're going through of awakening. It's very scary. But without knowing the full details, I couldn't answer that question.
So if you want to contact Joe, you can go to the Science of Ascension at yahoo.com, and he can maybe answer more of your question in private via email based on just a picture or a headshot. What we are able to do is once you become an energetic being, because there's no different distance, time, or space, we can look and see when the root occurred and be able to clearly look and see what was going on in your life to cause that. Keeping in mind that you are not just an energetic being. It can be a current picture.
Preferably a current picture.
Because that will give your state of being now and allow us to see what's affecting you now versus what was affecting you then. Everything is a continuous stream of consciousness, and that's one thing that you learn. So Are there any other questions?
No, thank you very much. My name is Joe Sica. This is one of my apprentices and very good friends. And the reason why I brought him on, I'm so thankful for him today, is because how he could so eloquently explain everything and so fluidly, where I tend to be very boring. Even I enjoy listening to my good friend here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Oh, my name is Franz, everyone. So, and this is Joe again. So,
thank you.